Hello and welcome to the GCSUNScast, the longest running Gold Coast Suns show on the interwebs, all thanks to our Patreon sponsors Dale Snelling, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Tom Kim, Chris Moore and Tim. You can support the show over at patreon.com/GCSUNScast. Check out the show at YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you like to get your podcasts from. Like, subscribe, and review to support the show. I'm your host, Shane, and unfortunately, this is the second time I am recording a show tonight, and unfortunately, I no longer have my guest here. We were supposed to welcome to the show Mitch Cleary. I had a great chat with him for 3/4 of an hour, but unfortunately, with computer issues and something unbeknownst to me, the recording never happened and it failed halfway through and there was nothing I could do to salvage it. So unfortunately, I'm very sorry, but there was no Mitch Cleary on tonight's show. I asked him whether he was a Suns member again. He said yes, he'd signed up again this year, so he was waiting for his membership pack from the Gold Coast Suns. We also discussed the coaching pressure gauge. Was Stuart Dew at risk of losing his job? Because Mitch does these articles on afl.com.au at the start of every season, ranking the coaches and which ones have the most pressure on them. Stuart Dew was ranked 7 this year, and with hindsight, Mitch stated he would probably move Stuart Dew down to 4 or 5. He's got a lot to prove. He's coming into his 5th year next year, and if we don't start seeing signs that the Suns are improving, then we probably have a tough decision to make. And as most football shows this year have stated, the coaches that don't win a premiership in the next 5 years generally don't go on to win one, with the exception of a couple of rare talents such as Damien Hardwick and Alistair Clarkson. We also discussed Cal Toomey's article today on the Gold Coast Suns losing or keeping their concessions. They have a start of second round pick this year, which the AFL put a freeze on last year, so they couldn't trade it. Discussions will take place later in the year to determine whether the Suns still have access to that pick. And Mitch was off the mindset that if they continue this poor form, it probably bodes well for them to keep that pick. However, I'm off the mindset that the Suns have had enough chances with picks. They've failed a lot of their selections, and their players they've selected haven't come on and developed as well as they should have. Just referring to on the couch last night, yep, because tonight's Tuesday, that Jonathan Brown brought up just how many of the failed draft picks the Suns have in the last few years, and it's quite overwhelming the number of players that haven't come on. So what's an extra concession pick going to do for a club that can't seem to select the right players? We also discussed the mid-season draft. Mitch Cleary was saying that the Gold Coast Suns would be looking at a number of key ruckmen in state leagues, from Corey Galt over in WA, former Collingwood player, Jackson Thurlow, who we talked about later in the show when we discussed Southport's win over Carlton, and a couple of others that are escaping my memory right now. The AFL round 5, the Gold Coast Suns were defeated by the Western Bulldogs 8 goals 8, 56 to 17 goals 16, 118, a 62-point loss. Corbett kicked 3 goals, King kicked 2. Ellis with 27 disposals, 85% efficiency, and 3 clearances was probably best on ground for the Suns. Jack Lukosius with 18 disposals and 394 metres gained was highly fancied as well. Oleg Markov, 22 disposals, 5 marks and 8 tackles was a shining light. And then Lockie Weller had the most metres gained with 494, and Tuke Miller with 27 disposals, 63% efficiency and 5 tackles was one of the only midfield beneficiaries that took the game on. What worked for the Gold Coast Suns? Well, going direct down the ground with speed gave King and Corbett plenty of opportunity. The inclusion of Jai Farah, 21 disposals, 81% efficiency, 8 marks and 9 intercepts, and Corbett, 3 goals, 8 marks, provided a target in the forward half and really gave the Suns some structure, giving them a target to kick to. Now, both of these players, Farah and Corbett, came in. Farah was in his second AFL game and looked superb down at centre-half back. And despite Charlie Ballard looking likely to come into the side, I can't see Farah being dropped. So hopefully we will get a reshuffle and the team will change up the way they play, because something needs to be done differently. Because what didn't work was the ruck merry-go-round. Burgess had the least impact around the ground. Graham couldn't compete at ground level or win enough contests, and Greenwood has to be the number one ruck. He was the most efficient out of his time there. He had 8 tackles, so he provides enough at ground level. I don't think Caleb Graham is suitable in the Gold Coast Suns side at the moment as a ruckman. He needs to go back and work on his defensive craft, and I think the Suns are better off just running Greenwood as a number one ruck with Burgess pinch hitting in. We'll get to it later, but there's a couple of options in the VFL. I still think Greenwood is probably the best choice. The defenders and the Gold Coast Suns don't go hand in hand. One of the obvious stats to track from the game was the Telstra tracker, the work rate in defence and attack. The Dogs were supreme with their work rate in defence and were pretty good in attack as well, whereas the Suns were the opposite. They were really good when they had the ball, and when they didn't have the ball, there weren't enough players running and doing the hard work to have an impact and get the ball back. And that really played into the Western Bulldogs game style. Yes, the Gold Coast Suns didn't show up in that first half with minus 61 on the score, a minus 55 disposal comparison, minus 15 inside 50s, minus 10 clearances, minus 15 contested possessions, minus 5 marks inside 50, and minus 6 tackles is pretty damning for the Gold Coast Suns. Now, yes, they didn't show up, as some would say, and I just quoted the work rate as stats for that. However, we can't understate the Western Bulldogs. I think that was the best half of football I've seen a team play in over a year. The Western Bulldogs were so slick, so skilled, and had first choice of the ball and didn't turn it over, rarely giving the Gold Coast Suns any opportunity to make the most of it. But as I just discussed before, the Gold Coast Suns probably didn't try hard enough or work hard enough to win the ball back. Now, there was a marked improvement in the second half, and we saw a 6 goals quarter for the Gold Coast Suns to peg that lead back. And what happened there? Well, the Gold Coast Suns went direct. They moved the ball efficiently. They were skillful. Jack Lukosius taking beautiful kicks out of half-back to put his teammates into better positions. And when they came off, the Gold Coast Suns looked fantastic. So really been emphasising how important it is for that quick, direct game of football that the Suns need to play. Now, in the VFL, it was a similar story. The Gold Coast Suns, 6 goals, 6-42, were defeated by Footscray, 16 goals, 13, 109. A 67-point loss there. Harrison Murtagh, the only multiple goal kickers with 2 apiece. Fiorini, 30 disposals, 11 marks, 6 tackles. Brody, 28 disposals, 1 goal, 2, 10 marks and 6 tackles. We also had Atkins and Sharp as a couple of players to keep an eye on. They had 23 disposals apiece. And Murtagh was a shining light for the Gold Coast Suns, providing a target in the forward line as well as getting a few hit outs and the experience in the ruck. So he's definitely in line to come in for the Suns this week if the club want to bring in a better ruckman or someone that might have more of an impact around the ground than Caleb Graham. Gold Coast weren't the only Gold Coast side competing in the VFL this week, with Southport getting a come-from-behind victory over Carlton, 12 goals 7, 109 to 16 goals 12, 108. Now the Southport side is full of former AFL players, with Gowers 5 goals and Webb 2 goals, former Bulldogs, and Connor Nutting 3 goals, and former Essendon player Fraser Thurlow with 3 goals. He's the ruckman for Southport and also had 49 hitouts. So certainly someone the Gold Coast Suns will consider at the mid-season draft when they look to try to bring in a ruckman. Now, the Suns reserves were well undermanned, just like the senior side, due to injury, and we saw the difference between the Gold Coast Suns side and the Footscray side, which is stacked full of talent. I spoke to Mitch Cleary on the matter regarding the VFL side to get a better perspective of how good Footscray are in the VFL, and they are certainly one of the better sides. The quality of the competition that the Suns find themselves playing in is a huge improvement over the NEFL, and we discussed just how much development the Gold Coast Suns could gain from that. Mitch also brought up the fact that teams like Geelong have a lot of former AFL listed players such as Jackson Thurlow and Darcy Lang playing in their reserve side. Now, I asked the question, why isn't the Gold Coast Suns doing this? And neither of us knew the answer to it. I'm not sure whether there are restrictions that force Gold Coast to play their academy kids, but the Gold Coast side pretty much responds off any uninjured suitable AFL players playing in it, along with a bunch of the academy kids. Good experience for those academy kids, but it could be better if they had a winning side that could compete with structure and disposal, allowing for some of these kids that when they do get a chance to play in the winning side and really fast track their development. So hopefully we'll see results from the Suns playing in this competition in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, the Southport side that had a win over Carlton had a lot of former AFL players in it. As we mentioned, Fraser Thurlow, formerly Essendon, Gowers, Lynch and Webb, formerly from the Bulldogs. Then we have Crossley, Boston, Dawson, Joyce, Nutting, Shear, Tape and Willis. And guess what? They are former Gold Coast Suns. So plenty of AFL talent at Southport, and it proved that they were able to get a win over Carlton and have an impact. So hopefully it won't just be Gold Coast having an impact, and Southport is going to have an impact in this competition as well. Let's move on to the injury news. Ballard and Lemons is a test, so we expect them to come back into the side this week. We finally have a time frame on Matt Rowe's injury, and he is going to be 8 weeks away. Towie, the Irish recruit, has suffered a stress fracture and will miss 5 weeks. And John Haynes, in a press conference today, said that Zach Smith just needs to get through training this week to be able to play football this weekend. He didn't go on to say whether that was AFL or VFL, but there's a very strong chance he could line up this weekend. Mitch Cleary suspected that AFL would be the way to go to just get a recognised ruckman into the Suns side, as Zach Smith at 80% would be better than what they're currently going with. We discussed the game against Sydney this weekend. Saturday at Metricon Stadium, Gold Coast Suns take on Sydney. Now they are side missing Dane Rampy, Isaac Heaney, Lance Franklin and Tom Hickey, a couple of important key players for the Suns, giving the Suns an opportunity to get a win that we didn't think was there a couple of weeks ago. The Suns will still have to bring their A game in the midfield with Luke Parker and Josh Kennedy still controlling that midfield. Jake Lloyd in the back line, still very damaging players, and the Gold Coast Suns will need to bring their best. We discussed whether David Swallow was up to AFL level when players like Luke Parker, who were probably on par with him a few years back, seems to have maintained his level while Swallow's become non-existent in the AFL side, and whether he'd still be playing weekly for the Gold Coast Suns if he wasn't captain. We also discussed just whether Graham needs to be in that side, whether McPherson should be in the side, and Jared Harbrow. Mitch Cleary would like to see players such as Sam Flanders or Braden Fiorini given an opportunity at the expense of some players like Nick Holman. So we discussed a couple of changes and decided that McPherson, Sexton and Graham were all likely to get the chop this week for failing to perform the last few weeks, with Flanders, Brodie and Ballard all likely to come in. I'd like to emphasise, I think Lemons should also be coming straight into that side as well at the expense of Jared Harbrow. So, unfortunately, I don't have a full episode to give you guys this week, and it doesn't look like we'll be getting Mitch back to record the show again during the week. I'd really like to thank Mitch for his time. It was a great conversation, and he's agreed to come on again in the near future. So hopefully we'll have him back in a couple of months and have some of the other AFL Exchange boys on the show with me. Until next time, go Suns!